Welcome to another edition of Every Cloud Has a Platinum Lining. This is Veronica. Ever since we undid her pigtails for her audition for the talent show, her hair is mad poofy.
Poof, poof, poof.
But now you got your water, so time to go to bed. Good night.
Okay, bye-bye.
Yay. I gotta finish the video. Okay.
Okay.
They blinded her with science. Do, do, do.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Thomas Dolby thing going on. All right, this one's going to be pretty fast. I noticed, you couldn't help but notice, the AEW show was last night in Atlanta, Georgia. And I actually watched it, and I enjoyed myself thoroughly, as did a number of Georgia indie talent who posted and posted and posted and marked out and marked out and marked out. And my first reaction was predictable, which is like, there's something kind of like, oh God, marking out. And, there's two minds on that, right? You should be a fan if you're in wrestling. There's nothing wrong with being a fan. There's nothing wrong about acting like a fan. And then there's the somebody quoted it to me, which I thought was actually pretty apropos, which is, once you're doing the thing, it's a paraphrase, a terrible one. Once you're doing the thing, you stop being a fan, and because you're in the business. And I was always of the mind, and it's the reason I don't have a lot of pictures with me with wrestling people that I worked with or wrestled or whatever, because I was just of the mind of, I'm a peer. I'm not going to act like a mark. But that's not what I wanted to talk about. That's at first what I was going to talk about. But the simple answer and the truthful answer is, you're going to do whatever you're going to do. And you're allowed to enjoy your life any which way you see fit. And I can see it a certain way, but it doesn't really fucking matter at the end of the day, does it? What I found more compelling was how, for this event, even more for like when WrestleMania was in Atlanta, there was sort of an excitement and a verve for it from the Georgia indie wrestling community. And instead of just getting into this old school argument about whether you should be marking out at somebody else's wrestling show, it sort of raised a more interesting thing. Why? Why is AEW really provided this fertile ground for Georgia indie wrestling people to sort of lose themselves and be a fan? And as I dug into the answer, I think I came up with a pretty interesting explanation, which is AEW has pulled off something that the WWE is unable to do. And you can't say, well, because it's new, because there have been new large-ish promotions. Certainly, people don't seem to be falling all over themselves about Impact Wrestling coming to Atlanta. People didn't even fall all over themselves for the NWA coming to Atlanta. People didn't fall all over themselves whenever Ring of Honor comes into town, though they do to a bigger extent than some of the others. And even WrestleMania itself, which is the biggest show we've got in the industry, people didn't fall all over themselves about it. So why AEW? And I think it just comes down to AEW is a product that not only has true national appeal, right? They got a legitimate show on TNT, but it's also a very populist show for wrestling people. It's very inside, right? Orange Cassidy would be a very difficult thing to explain to somebody who was not in the wrestling business on why it is so interesting and so great. And I think it's very telling that he got one of the three biggest pops of the night. I think that's undeniable, right? And even I found myself, as I was watching the show, which I felt compelled to do, frankly, because so many Georgia indie wrestling people were talking about it and messaging about it, and the Tapped Out guys were there, and Matt Griffin was there, and I just went, let me watch the show, just because I wanted to know at first. And then something very interesting happened, which was, as I watched the tag match, right, with Kenny Omega, Hangman against, but when the guy tightrope walked and kicked dude in the face, I found myself like, that was breathtaking. And then the Cody Rhodes match happened and it was fucking good. And I just went, fuck. AEW is the populist choice for wrestling people and disenfranchised wrestling fans who want anything else to believe in other than the WWE. And the two of those things are not mutually exclusive. I think they're Venn diagrams, and the cross is AEW. And that's something that I think was a little unexpected. And though AEW has many flaws, most of which are related to the fact that it's basically the boys who run that thing. But that flaw is also its greatest strength because they know how to appeal to wrestling people and fans that are borderline or want to be wrestling people who, as anybody can see if you look at indie wrestling objectively, are often the same person or one and the same. Those two Venn diagrams, hardcore wrestling fans who comment on wrestling frequently and indie wrestling people almost completely eclipse one another on that Venn diagram. And AEW is squarely within their wheelhouse. And I've had this feeling, and I've talked to friends about this in the wrestling business, and they get upset at me because I go, AEW does have a chance to be something different, and they immediately want to skew it as like, no, it really doesn't have a chance. It's just so badly run. And I go, they've got a re-upped contract. Are they making money? Probably not. However, they're doing all this, and by this I mean beating NXT soundly, especially in the demographic fight, which is the most important one. When you're talking about 1 million people or less watching, demographics become infinitely more important. And they're doing it while making mistakes. And they're doing it without having come up with a hot extended angle yet, or even a league identity. Right now, they are coasting and relying on being an inside baseball kind of product, but one that has undeniable appeal, unlike Ring of Honor, which doesn't quite have the appeal, because Ring of Honor, at its core and its heart, didn't want to get too stupid with it, or was there something about them that they're a very conservative wrestling company on one level? And now they've completely given into, we're here to develop talent. That's our primary focus. Sorry, that's a hard thing to rally behind as a national product, right? It's the equivalent of a TV show going, we know we're not great, but a lot of people who are on this TV show will go on to be on bigger, better TV shows. That's a hard way to get a following on a large scale. AEW makes no apologies for what it is, which I think is a lot of its appeal as well. And while it's undeniable that there are people that need more work, and I have a feeling that One Fall is going to be a part of sort of helping to rework these guys, which is a huge story, right? I think there's also this idea of, I got a chance to get signed by them. But that's not all of the appeal of AEW. It can't be. It's not just accessibility. AEW right now, to me, is walking this really delicate tightrope. Ironic, because that's the move that caught my attention, running along and kicking somebody on the tightrope of that top rope, right? They're walking the tightrope between, and it's a sex appeal kind of thing. Like, sex appeal is about exclusivity, holding hands with attainability, right? It's why, as a rock star or a famous person, the dumbest thing you can do is sort of publicly reveal that you're committed to somebody else. Taylor Swift, the day she gets married, a lot of her appeal is done because it has to do with attainability, this feeling of attainability, but also this feeling of exclusivity. And AEW is doing it so well. The WWE feels unattainable. And it's why those weeks, those access week before WrestleMania is so important for them. It's vital for the WWE because it's the only time that you have accessibility. And this is when you know the WWE is in real trouble. The more that you have access to their stars, the more trouble they are in because they have to peddle away their exclusivity and their unattainability for money. And other indie leagues are too accessible. Impact slash TNA has always been this open thing of like, oh, meet the stars after, and they're signing autographs. And I mean, it's no different than an indie. And Ring of Honor, people would say, has always been sort of a glorified indie. To what extent had to do almost exclusively with their exclusivity versus accessibility. This is what I realized last night. AEW's doing it right. All of their stars you could see at your local indie show for the most part. Look at Georgia itself. You want to see their biggest stars? Jericho, Cody Rhodes, right? Guess what? They were at fucking Southern Honor last year as a surprise thing. And Kenny Omega, their top 3 stars were at Southern Honor. So there's an accessibility there. And yet, there's an exclusivity also. It's just within reach. It's the perfect carrot for the indie wrestling person and the hardcore wrestling fan. Close enough to touch, but yet far enough away that you have to extend yourself to that touch. And right now, they've got that going on better than any other wrestling group. That's what last night showed me. That they were close enough that wrestling people would forget themselves and become fans and not worry so much about the mask and the face of being a wrestling person in favor of wanting to touch. But yet, the excitement of I'm part of an event, but yet the event is bigger than me. So congratulations to AEW. There is a platinum lining in the cloud of, God, all these fucking wrestling people, supposed wrestling people and otherwise are marking out, and there's something kind of disquieting for that about that. And you know, you can hate me for saying that. I'm just telling you the truth. I'm sure there's a number of people that were like, it's a fucking bad look. And I saw a number of comments sort of making fun of it and that kind of thing. But instead of just going into that tired old lame argument, the Jim Cornette kind of argument, I'd rather look at the more interesting thing, which is how has AEW accomplished this? And I think by studying that, and I think that there are indies within Georgia that need to study how that was accomplished. How can you attain this balance between being exclusive? Because indie wrestling has gotten to be too inclusive. Everybody can play, and that takes away the special nature of pro wrestling, the outlaw nature of pro wrestling, right? But if you're too exclusive, then you're too inside baseball. And there's a number of groups that are balanced and are on one side of the center or the other. I don't think anybody's got it perfectly right yet. And I'm curious as groups try to figure out this balance. The ones that get closest to the center, I think are the groups that are going to have the most success in 2020. This has been Every Cloud. Fuck that up. This has been Every Cloud has a platinum lining.